frankly thought in some ways it could be worse in the markets because this is a big transition. You saw the president said earlier today, it's like a patient who was very sick. We did the operation and now it's time to make the patient better. And that's exactly what we're doing.
What bothered me, Aaron, was that they really did over and over again. The president said, listen, it's going to be reciprocal. So you do it, we do it. And that was going to be so good. And I really believed in it. And I feel like a sucker tonight, because I am not a free trader and I do not believe in free trade. And I was just as tough, if not tougher than his people, but they screwed it up.
Jim Cramer just went off on Donald Trump like never before. Yep, you heard that right. The same guy who once praised Trump now can't help but tear into him over those disastrous tariffs. But here's the kicker. Cramer himself admitted he was completely wrong about Trump. Talk about a plot twist. Get ready for a wild ride full of epic facepalms, cringeworthy moments, and jaw-dropping takes. If you thought the stock market was volatile, just wait until you hear Cramer's take on this political circus. Trust me, you won't believe what happens
Economy's
next.
Good. Everything, except one thing. We have a president who's very angry at everyone except Vladimir Putin. Oh, no, maybe even Vladimir Putin. And his wrath has made investors so downcast and so negative that people have just given up. They want nothing to do with stocks, nothing to do with this world, because they're sure the White House will keep laying on the tariffs that seem to be wiping out your wealth and my wealth. In this environment, it's a wonder anyone's buying anything, unless they think that the one person who's standing in the way of a great economy, one that could have incredible growth with lowered inflation, lower oil prices, less regulation, more confidence, will finally change the stripes. If Trump can lose the anger, drop the scowl, stop diminishing our friends and rivals while making common cause with our enemies, and generally start acting like he did in his first term?
Jim Cramer, the man who once thought a 1,000-point drop on the Dow was a reason to pop champagne, has officially crashed and burned on Donald Trump. Yes, the same Jim Cramer who once hailed Trump's business genius like he was the second, coming of Warren Buffett, only to suddenly make a U-turn so dramatic it probably gave his own financial portfolio whiplash.
Like him, the president has him just where he wants him.
Really?
Yes, the tariffs are very high, much higher than anyone ever thought possible even a year ago. There's no inflation in this country. It hasn't really hurt our growth. There's some other reasons why our growth might be slowing down because the rest of the world's slowing, but it hasn't hurt directly our country. They are hurt very badly. You know, there was something that happened the other day. We restricted Costco, not COST kind, but COSCO, giant shipping company. It's really killing them again. The president has squeezed the news so tight, Joe, that just by saying, listen, we're not going to take it up again, he's going to get a concession. Again, hate him or like him, he has them where he wants them.
This is the same guy who once enthusiastically called Trump's real estate empire a textbook example of savvy investing and praised his deals as something to be admired. But now Cramer is backpedaling so quickly, it's like he's in the Indy 500 trying to dodge the crash that's about to take out his own credibility. Watching Jim Cramer flip-flop on Trump is like watching a circus performer attempt to walk a tightrope while juggling flaming torches. Utter chaos with no graceful landing in sight.
For months, I've been skeptical about the trade negotiations, even though we clearly had the upper hand. I figured the U.S. and China were too far apart on these issues, so both sides would try to hold out until something changed the equation. Then today we learned that the Trump administration's reached a preliminary deal with the Chinese that takes next week as planned tariff hikes off the table. So how the heck did that happen? If you take and take and take, once you simply stop taking, it's a big deal. I think that's been Trump's strategy all along. In the last few months, he's added multiple schedules of tariffs that were set to go higher automatically. He made these ever-increasing import duties the new normal.
If you're enjoying this, be sure to subscribe. Now, the only problem, midway through the act, Cramer realizes he never learned how to juggle in the first place. One moment, he's singing Trump's praises like some financial savant, comparing him to legendary investors. The next, he's tossing out critiques with the intensity of a man who just discovered he's been wearing a fake Rolex for the last decade. Let's be real, the fact that Jim Cramer, a so-called expert in reading stock tickers and knowing the pulse of the market, has gone from praising Trump's supposed business genius to throwing shade like it's a cloudy afternoon is nothing short of comical. You can practically hear him in his signature fast-talking, breathless style, backpedaling faster than a guy caught lying about a high-stakes poker game. This isn't just a slip of the tongue, it's like he's on a roller coaster of regret and the brakes just failed.
What do you have to say to the American investor in this country?
Well, I think you're going to see some very good days ahead. A lot of incentives are going to be given. You saw yesterday a $1 billion investment that we give you very fast approvals. Nobody's come up with that one yet, although it seems pretty simple. I think you're going to have some great days ahead. We have to conclude a couple of bad wars that are going on. A lot of bad things are going on, but we'll get them done.
Do you think that we are in a situation where business will be far more embraced under you than currently?
Well, I don't want to really knock current, but I will tell you more than at any time, anywhere in the history of our country.
Jim Cramer's 180-degree turn is the perfect metaphor for the stock market itself. One day it's soaring, the next it's crashing down. In the blink of an eye, the man who once treated Trump like a financial genius is now publicly admitting that maybe, just maybe, he was wrong. And that, my friends, is why we tune into Jim Cramer, not for the sound advice, but for the spectacle of watching a self-proclaimed financial expert eat his own words like a six-figure buffet. And here we are. Cramer's latest move, he's finally reading the room and realizing that maybe, just maybe, trading stocks on a whim and deciding tariffs are a good idea without thinking through the actual consequences isn't the smartest play. But hey, at least he's admitting it, kind of.
The American working person, this is what they came up with? Jeez, come on, have some gumption, have some math.
I mean, how in the world do they do that after all of this?
They assured us over and over again, Aaron, that they were going to do the thing that would make it so that the tariffs would come down and the countries would that were bad actors would change their ways. And then Israel decides to get rid of tariff.
And they tariffed them anyway.
Vietnam decides to cut their tariff, and they still got the highest tariff.
Take a moment to appreciate the sheer absurdity of the situation. Jim Cramer, a man who can't seem to decide if he's an investor, a guru, or a comedian, is now looking back at his previous praise for Trump like someone who just woke up from a strange dream. Wait, I endorse this guy? What was I thinking? It's as if he suddenly realized he handed over his life savings to someone who thought building a wall was the solution to global trade. The same guy who treated the stock market like his personal carnival ride. But honestly, who can blame him? Trump's decisions were so baffling that even Cramer, whose job is to read the room, couldn't keep up. The man's built a career shouting predictions at a screen like a modern-day Nostradamus, yet even he couldn't foresee that Trump's presidency would make him second-guess his own financial advice. Suddenly, buying the dip felt like betting on a horse that just keeps running in circles and calling it a race.
They made a bargain with the devil. They decided to get rid of the American working person's good job with a good pension and sacrifice it so we could get cheap goods. And they never thought for a minute, the Republicans or Democrats, what would happen to those towns and those people, and they were left behind. And I always felt that was horrendous. A president comes along that's going to do something about it, and this is what he does?
Remember when Cramer used to sing the praises of Trump's business acumen? Now, he looks back on those days like he just realized he invested in a lemonade stand run by a toddler on a sugar high. The kind of investor who believes their own hype until they find out the market's been rigged by a reality TV star trying to run the country. But hey, who wouldn't be baffled by a president who thinks tariffs are a good idea and somehow manages to make the stock market behave like a roller coaster? On steroids? Cramer, welcome to the post-Trump reality, where even the best and brightest are left scratching their heads. Let's dive into this mess. When Trump first rolled out his tariffs, Cramer was right there, clapping like a seal at SeaWorld, convinced it would solve all of America's economic woes. Of course, reality hit faster than a toddler who just spilled juice on the carpet. Suddenly, Cramer realized the tariffs weren't the golden ticket to prosperity Trump promised. But instead of admitting his mistake like a rational adult, Cramer pivoted like a guy who just stepped into a puddle of cold water after confidently jumping into the deep end of a pool. Classic Cramer move. It was a shame, really.
It was such a shame because they missed the opportunity, and now they have to pay the price. And it's funny too because none of this stock market, none of this had to happen. And I feel bad because a lot of people lose money when this happens. I hope people just be calm, be constructive. But the way that they handled it was so bush league that I was surprised. President Trump has people who around him know these things. And
so what happens when the tariffs don't quite live up to the hype? Well, if you're Jim Cramer, the stock market guru turned self-proclaimed expert on just about everything, you can almost feel the heat radiating off of him as his face turns a shade of red, usually reserved for a lobster trying to escape a boiling pot. Instead of acknowledging the reality that these tariffs were about as effective as using a band-aid to fix a broken leg, he took a different route, downplaying the whole fiasco with the classic, well, it wasn't that bad spin. Now, let's be clear, Cramer might have been trying to put a positive spin on things, but when you're talking about tariffs that were supposed to be the economic equivalent of a magic bullet, turning them into a small hiccup is about as believable as claiming the Titanic just had a minor water issue. The truth is that these tariffs, which were sold as the ultimate solution to save American jobs and protect national interests, ended up hurting businesses, raising consumer prices, and surprise, surprise, doing very little to achieve the goals they were marketed with. But of course, Cramer wasn't about to let that wreck his narrative.
Tariffs. We have incredibly low unemployment, except where it's caused by the Trump administration. We have a market that was doing extremely well last year until the Trump administration sowed a level of uncertainty that I can't recall any time since, are you ready, Ski Daddy, Jimmy Carter, which is the last time people were really worried about inflation, about stagflation, okay? Back then, stagflation was real. Now, Jimmy Carter, curious benchmark, break out the cardigan sweater. I know it's a brutal comparison. You think I did it idly? I cannot think of another president in my lifetime who knocked down the stock market simply by opening his mouth than Jimmy Carter. Eureka, I have.
See, when you're dealing with Trump's policies, downplaying their failures becomes practically a full-time job. It's like trying to convince everyone your house isn't that on fire when the roof is literally caving in. Sure, you're not roasted to a crisp just yet, but the damage is pretty obvious. And Cramer? Well, he's standing there in front of the camera, desperately selling the idea that the house isn't really that on fire after all. Meanwhile, the roof's on the ground and the fire department is nowhere to be found. Let's take a moment to break down the genius behind these tariffs. The concept seemed deceptively simple. Slap hefty tariffs on Chinese imports and boom, America would be swimming in cash while the rest of the world scrambled to catch up. The theory was that China would give in, the US economy would thrive, and everyone would conveniently forget about the consequences. It's like thinking you could solve a Rubik's Cube by repeatedly smashing it with a hammer. Sure, there's action, but the outcome, definitely not what you had in mind.
But people like that, they know. He knows.
You know, I tried to think like that because Peter Navarro is someone I've known for 5 decades.
Yep.
And I was hoping that Peter, who I talked with a lot, really understood, because he understood. He taught me these things. And I know he knows what reciprocal tariff really is, and he didn't deliver on that. And that was a shame, because there was such a great opportunity to course correct and make it so all these people who have taken advantage of our country repeatedly and wiped out all of the jobs in small towns, wiped out my father's job. This is one of the reasons why I've always felt like this. It's ridiculous how badly we've been taken advantage of. And I thought they were going to do something. And what did they do? They cratered the damn stock market and gave us nothing.
Well,
the logic was simple to some. Punish China and watch the US economy soar to new heights. But here's the reality. Tariffs don't just hurt the target, they hit everyone involved, especially consumers and businesses in the US who end up paying higher prices for goods. Instead of a booming economy, we got an economic headache, complete with disrupted supply chains, higher costs, and a whole lot of uncertainty. It's like someone thought they could outsmart decades of global trade dynamics with a few bold moves. The problem? This approach completely overlooked the complexity of international markets and the real consequences for businesses and workers who rely on stable trade relationships. But of course, the true winner here was Trump's ego. After all, a trade war might not fix the economy, but it sure makes a lot of noise. And that's something he could boast about, even if it left the country with more problems than it started with. Cramer naturally had to go along with the ride, like every other economic expert, pretending they knew what was going on. You could practically hear the internal monologue in Cramer's head as he scrambled to justify his support. It's fine, it's fine. The stock market's going to bounce back. A little chaos is good for the economy. Yeah, this is great, totally. Not sweating over here. But as we know, the tariffs didn't just smack the stock market upside the head with a sledgehammer. No. Just because there was a flurry of activity didn't mean it was headed in the right direction.
Just because there's a flurry of business announcements by President Trump does not mean the sky is falling. Especially when he's doing exactly what he told you he was going to do, putting tariffs on Mexico, Canada, and China. Yet that's all I heard last night and this morning, where once again we heard that the world was ending, with the market looking like it's about to fall apart, only to rebound when we got an amenable statement from the president of Mexico, Claudia Sheinbaum, suddenly went from down on.
The tariffs didn't just hit the stock market, they hit the average American right in the wallet. But hey, as long as the rich are still getting their tax cuts, who cares, right? And this is where Cramer's flip-flopping really shines. The same guy who once fawned over Trump like he was handing out free candy at a Halloween parade suddenly started to see the error of his ways when those tariffs sent prices through the roof. His response? A classic Cramer shuffle. Okay, maybe I was a little wrong, but let's not dwell on it too much. Maybe I got too excited, maybe it didn't work out, but you know what? It's fine. Ah yes, because the best way to handle the fact that you were leading the charge for an economic disaster is to act like nothing ever happened. It's almost like watching someone pretend to be shocked when their fireworks display ends with them setting fire to their own house.
As we're concerned, though, we need less Jimmy Carter, more Ronald Reagan. Bottom line, maybe Wednesday isn't Liberation Day. It's just the day when American investors may be finally liberated from the president's not-so-pro-business attitude once he gets the tariffs out of the way.
But let's not forget the real mastermind behind this whole mess, Donald Trump, the man who thought tariffs were the magic fix for trade issues. You can almost picture him in the Oval Office, sitting at his desk with a Sharpie, scribbling out plans, thinking, I'll just slap a 25% tariff on everything from China and then we'll see how they like that. Of course, no one bothered to mention that tariffs tend to drive up prices on pretty much everything for the average consumer. But hey, who cares about that when you're living in the bubble of your gold-plated tower, right? And as for those amazing trade deals he promised, yeah, let's talk about those. Trump made it sound like he was out there making history, shaking hands with foreign leaders and rewriting the rules of international commerce. But in the end, it was all just talk, empty bluster, and bold promises as hollow as a taco shell.